world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Tuesday, May 19th, as I am recording this, and getting to it about mid-afternoon. Now, if you have followed my short form stuff on YouTube, if you follow my TikToks, you may notice I got a haircut. I went ahead and recorded some stuff, had some time, and it was time, needed to go trim it up a little bit. So I got that taken care of. That also kind of puts you in perspective of what happened and where I ended up being when it comes to recording this. So, getting into it a little later in the day than I anticipated, but still ahead of schedule. I've been having some upload issues, but that's been different from the processing issues I was facing. So, we can go from there. Now, I'm going to complain a little bit once again about TikTok. And my stuff's not getting put out there here on TikTok or on TikTok. And with the couple of videos I posted already today, I was watching the analytics. And when I can post the same video on TikTok and YouTube, and you guys know, I've talked about it before, I use an automation program that helps me upload everything to YouTube and Blue Sky from TikTok when I post them up over there. And when I've got about 10% of the subscribers here on YouTube, or on YouTube rather, I guess, for those listening on Spotify. I've got about 10% of the following. And when I can get similar numbers on YouTube, or actually better numbers in a lot of cases, I had one video here recently, in the last day or two. It did, and it is stuck at under 300 views on TikTok. It's at 2.7K on YouTube. That's huge, right? I mean, by comparison, I've got a platform with YouTube where I've only got a little over 1,100 followers, and I appreciate every single one of you, don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about that number at all. But compare that to TikTok, where I have 11,000, I should have way more views. And I'm not the only creator that is complaining about this. And I've been doing some looking into what they have done. And with the US acquisition of TikTok, because of the TikTok sale, and you're probably going to hear me complain about this more and more the next while, because it's not going to change over there on TikTok. That what they did is they changed how the algorithm pushes content. It used to be they would push it out to everybody. Basically, it would hit the FYP the minute you posted it, and if it did over certain numbers on the FYP in the first hour or two, it would stay on the FYP for everybody, and it would get you a lot of views. Now, they push your content out the way I understand it, and I did get a big chunk of this from AI. I was talking to Gemini AI from Google, trying to understand what was going on. And I realized AI is just doing web searches and kicking back results. But I got more information from AI than I got from anybody else. And what they told me is that with these changes now, is they put it out to your video out to a percentage of your followers that are currently online. So if you don't have a very big following like me, and a lot of your followers aren't online, um, your video gets stuck. And then if they don't all watch your video all the way through or beyond a certain percentage of it, um, and they just like and scroll because they don't want to listen to politics. Since I talk news and politics, if they don't want to deal with politics right now, but they want to engage with my content, if you scroll too fast, you actually hurt that creator. And I'm not blaming anybody. This is just what I found out. And the reason is they are trying to scrub and sanitize the app basically. They don't want controversial content. They don't want um, a lot of negative things that could impact brands because now it's all about being corporate safe, brand safe, trying to end up um, fixing things for like. And I'm gonna. This isn't a knock on them or whatever. It's just one of the first advertisers I see a lot: Disney and Hulu and those kind of things. They come up quite often in my feed, so they're paying a lot of money to be on TikTok as ad space. And what TikTok is now doing is trying to make sure that it's more funny skits, it's safer content, but it's also popular content around it because they're trying to make sure that they get the best responses for their uh, the ad revenue. This app, or that app rather, because I'm not recording on TikTok, uh, but TikTok is, I think, effectively a dying uh, social media app. Something is going to take its place. Now, where am I going to go? I'm not going anywhere on TikTok for the time being. I'm going to keep posting over there. The fact that it's been almost a year since I have hit the Creator Rewards Fund, um, and you need to have 10,000 subscribers to hit the Creator Rewards Fund. Uh, but I had heard they'd also changed the metrics required for new creators to hit that money from 10,000 to 15,000. Not sure if that is accurate, but that's one of the things I had heard. So if I start over with a new account, well, I got to go work even harder to get there. And what they do is, with them only showing your content to a certain percentage of your follower base, before they realize it's doing well enough so it hits the broader FYP, they're effectively making it so the creators don't get paid. Um, and I'm not the only creator that's complained about it, and it's not going to get any better until they decide to change their business model. Thing is, it doesn't matter to them. They're making enough money, and it's going to be very hard to change it back. Um, there is going to be, if the Democrats decide to get back in power, they're not just going to be able to, even with a supermajority, pass a law around a veto, forcing TikTok US to sell back to ByteDance. That could be challenged in court, and probably because of Citizens United, which has said corporations effectively are people and money equals speech for corporations, um, that they might not be able to force TikTok US to sell because of how the sale was done initially. It was brought up on um, bullshit ideas. You may remember some of the congressional hearings. The people making the decisions were making decisions not based on what is actually best for Americans. They didn't even understand the technology that was being asked. Like, I remember one of the senators, and I think it was a senator, maybe it was a representative, doesn't matter, was sitting there in one of the hearings about it and asked, well, if I have TikTok on my phone and my phone's connected to the home Wi Fi, does TikTok access my Wi-Fi? And the answer to that, of course, is yes, because that's how the internet works. But I think what the uh, member of Congress, I don't remember which chamber it was from, was trying to get to, and the answer to that would be no, is does TikTok have access to other devices on the network? But because they don't understand how the technology works, um, they're asking questions the wrong way and then getting answers that they seem to think confirms what they are trying to get to for an answer when they didn't know. Now, this also came from a game of chicken, right? Um, and when I say they were playing a game of chicken, well, both parties were fucking around with this. Republicans were trying to say it was national security related, and they tacked it into a must pass foreign aid package that the Democrats wanted to pass to help our allies, including, and I know it's unpopular, uh, it was an aid package to Israel, an aid package to Ukraine, aid for Taiwan, and I think there was one other group that was getting some foreign aid. And Republicans said, well, we'll sneak this TikTok ban in there as part of it. And then, well, if we put the TikTok ban on there, they won't be able to vote for the foreign aid. Democrats said, hold my beer, we'll vote for it anyway, because they thought in 2024 that they were going to win in November. And I think they had every intention of winning in November. And then after they had control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they were going to pass a reversal of the TikTok ban and have it move on to be business as normal. And then they lost. Both sides played chicken with the other, hoping that they would blink. And now we're dealing with the fallout from it. Now there are other apps, Upscrolled, Clapper, that do similar things to TikTok, and I am looking into those. I used to do Clapper, um, and I haven't been on there for quite a while, mostly because uploading on there was clunkier. Um, and it currently is not supported by any of the third party hosting platforms like what I use to repurpose my content from TikTok to YouTube, etc. If I could find one that worked, I would already be posting daily on Clapper all of my short content because I was gaining a little bit of traction over there. Um, and it looked like it was going to be the replacement TikTok. And if it does work, I would love to just keep going and doing what I was doing. But it doesn't. Upscrolled, same problem. It's not uh, feasible just yet, and it doesn't have, from what I understand, from the little bit I've messed with it, it doesn't have a uh, schedule feature, so I wouldn't be able to just record in one shot like I have been doing and post later and later and later in the day. Um, which then that means you have to log in, you got to do all those things. It becomes a little more of a hassle. So looking into those options down the road, and maybe I end up leaving TikTok. I don't know. I wanted to complain about it for a little bit. Kind of took longer than I intended, but this whole thing has been very frustrating because I try to make good content for everybody to talk about the news and the events of the day. And then at least on one of the platforms that I'm on, nobody sees it. It's just very frustrating. So let's get into the news of the day. Uh, you might have heard about this yesterday. It came out. Trump planning to build helipad at White House for Marine One. President, this comes from The Hill. I like The Hill. It seems less partisan, more fact based. It's also, while I used to like CNN, CNN has become less left leaning. They have shifted more to the right and they were trying to capture some of the uh, disenfranchised conservative voices that were getting pissed off by Fox News and OA and Newsmax, the ones that weren't as far right as MAGA. So they tried to shift their view to the right, and in doing so, they made it more difficult for those of us on the left to like their positions. The other thing here is that now their online page, and this is a problem with corporate America, you can only read so many articles a day before you have to sign into a pay service. You either have to pay to subscribe to them the way at least something I don't it seemed like you had to pay, or you had to at least create an account to view. And I think from what I saw, it looked like it was at least implied that there was a subscription, or you had to subscribe and log in through your cable provider. Well, I don't have cable. I haven't had cable in 13 years. Uh, I think cable services are a dying breed, cable and satellite. Most people, I believe, are not using cable anymore. Um, Not when you have so many streaming options where you can watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it, and you're not stuck paying for a bunch of channels you would never watch. Now, anyway, going back to this article from The Hill and Marine One, President Trump is planning to build a helipad on the White House lawn for the new Marine One helicopter. Wall Street Journal reported Sunday, citing sources familiar with the matter, that the president has discussed placing a helipad at the White House so the new helicopter, the VH 92A Patriot, does not destroy the South Lawn. Three sources also told the Washington Post that Trump is looking to create a permanent helipad. The newspaper reported that helipad concept has been floated for years and is seen as a way to prevent the helicopter, which is more likely to burn grass than previous Marine One aircraft, from damaging the South Lawn. The Hill has reached out to the White House about the reported helipad. Um, this is in addition to the other construction projects. Now, we have reservations at the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool on the National Mall has emerged as a flashpoint in the president's rush to overhaul some of the most iconic landmarks in the district. President announced plans to fix and renovate the reflecting pool last month, calling it terrible and filthy. The president has also spearheaded a controversial project to build a ballroom at the White House, which led to the destruction of the building's east wing. On Saturday, the Senate parliamentarian ruled against a $1 billion provision to fund the ballroom in a reconciliation package, throwing a wrench against federal dollars for the project. Well, the thing is, Donald Trump had said that the ballroom was going to be privately funded. And then the White House Correspondents' Dinner happened, and you had Senator Lindsey Graham come out and say, well, we're going to try to fund the uh, the ballroom through, um, we should put $400 billion of funds to the creation of the ballroom. And then they brought up this $1 billion renovation package. Now, part of this renovation package is trying to build a bunker underneath the White House, underneath this ballroom. And I've seen a lot of people have been talking about this bunker idea. They're talking about it having military technology, anti-drone technology, a hospital wing, all of these kind of things for the president. And I've said before, if that was what we were talking about, and they had framed it that way initially, you potentially could have even gotten Democrats on board to do that. But they didn't do it that way. They came out and they started talking about the need for this ballroom, this vanity project, and they haven't put anything through Congress. Now, why is there a push to fund it through Congress? Well, That's because Donald Trump has been sued, and certain judges, even though it got turned down on appeal, had put in injunctions saying that they didn't follow proper procedures and that congressional oversight and congressional permission is required to build on the White House grounds because of the spending side of it. That because it is a public building owned by the government, um, and because it falls under historic uh, building statutes and things like that, that Congress must authorize massive and major changes. Now, one of the things you hear from people on the right is, well, where was your complaint when Obama spent millions of dollars to put in a basketball court? And we've talked about it before. The basketball court was not done by Obama for millions of dollars. It was a couple thousand at best because all they did was paid somebody to paint some basketball lines on a tennis court, and they bought some movable portable basketball hoops. It's not even a permanent setup. Um, vastly different, and it didn't affect the structure of the White House at all. I compare it to you know some parks you see in certain areas. Um, I remember growing up, there were a couple parks near where I lived. Um, they didn't have separate basketball and tennis courts. They were combined. And the tennis court and the basketball hoop were both painted on the same surface. And you had to go basically if you were going to play tennis, you played tennis and based on the tennis markings. If you were playing basketball, you followed the basketball markings. And it was a way of saving space, and it was a way of providing options in these parks. Um, Not a big deal, but you know they don't care, right? The Republicans found something they can compare it to. They can blame Obama for it and say that it's the same thing. All right. Moving on. Um, Now it came out. Donald Trump uh, dropped his lawsuit against the federal government. He was suing the IRS for $10 billion with a B because his taxes had been leaked. Now, you may remember this story. Back, I believe it was during 2024, 2020. No, it was 2020 because I think it was still during his term. Um, his taxes got leaked by an IRS employee. And those taxes embarrassed Donald Trump. He didn't want his taxes released to the general public. He'd been claiming for years that he was under IRS audit and that his taxes were too complex for the average person to understand. Well, they end up uh, going ahead and he drops this lawsuit basically the same day that a federal judge was going to hold a hearing on how uh, the president could sue his own IRS. How could the sitting president sue the IRS? And especially when it came to public comments that Donald Trump made, because Donald Trump can't shut up. If you haven't noticed, he's always yapping and he always says the dumb thing. And he was talking about this and he repeatedly had said, well, he would just tell him to settle it. And it really looked corrupt. And a judge was going to hold a hearing on it. Well, they dropped the lawsuit. A Department of Justice on Monday launched a nearly $2 billion anti-weaponization fund as part of a settlement after Donald Trump sued the IRS for $10 billion. The fund, which received a total of $1.776 billion, will give payouts to issue formal apologies to those who pursue settlements because they believe they were wronged by the government. Now, the number is intentional. Donald Trump routinely invokes 1776. They do things like that when they're doing things for their side to make their side believe they are patriotic. The settlement comes after Trump was criticized for seeking a major payout from the IRS over a suit he filed related to leaking his tax returns. His attorney general, Todd Blanche, who was Donald Trump's private attorney before becoming the acting attorney general, said, quote, "The machinery of government should never be weaponized against any American, and it is this department's intention to make right the wrongs that were previously done while ensuring this never happens again," end quote. Basically, they're saying anybody who was charged under the Biden DOJ for crimes related to January 6th or things that had happened when it comes to helping Donald Trump, because they're saying, and they're wrong in this, crimes were committed. Most of them were found guilty by a jury of their peers. They have found to commit crimes, and most of them had taken pardons, and part of the pardon is accepting and admitting that you committed a crime, that there was some guilt there. And I can already see the maggots in the comments. Oh, you're saying, oh, if you accepted a pardon, you're admitting wrongdoing. Well, in a way, but that doesn't apply to necessarily all pardons. The Biden pardons that were issued at the end of his term to certain people, he did and they accepted, not because they actually did anything wrong, but because they knew this administration wouldn't leave them alone until it came out one way or the other, right? They were going to go against everybody who sat on the J6 committee. This administration was going to continue to go after Hunter Biden and the rest of the Biden family with no evidence of any actual wrongdoing, just that they wanted, um, they wanted the soundbite that made it look good against Democrats, right? Now, it says here, Trump will not receive money from the fund, but he may find a way to get part of it to put a claim in. The settlement is highly unusual in nature that the president was suing the government he now controls. Justice Department has not elaborated on who may be eligible to receive payouts from the funds, but several convicted J6 rioters have pending suits. The move to dismiss the case came in a suit Trump launched just days after taking office to seek damages over his two criminal prosecutions relating to J6 in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. So he commits crimes, allegedly, and there was enough there to at least get an indictment, and they were going toward trial, and Donald Trump claims that, well, oh, I was so wronged in this. Well, he thinks anybody who looks into anything he does is wronging him because he thinks he's perfect in everything he does. Settlement was approved Monday as a judge agreed to the Justice Department's move to voluntarily dismiss a case that also sought damages, from his J6 and Mar-a-Lago documents case. The Justice Department's dismissal effectively sidestepped the judge overseeing the matter, with U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams, an Obama appointee, raising concerns in April over whether the parties are sufficiently adverse to each other as so to satisfy the Constitution's case or controversy requirement, which requires cases before the court to be genuine disputes between adversaries. Williams ordered both parties to submit briefs to explain to the court why parties should not be considered colluding. What that means is when you sue somebody in civil court, there needs to be proof that there are damages, right? That there is a reason you are actually adversaries in this case. What it's saying is, I couldn't make up a reason to sue my best friend to get a settlement from his insurance, knowing we're going to split the money, that kind of thing. And that's what they're saying here is, well, you're both part of the same branch, you were working together, and how can the DOJ defend the actions of the president while also they are supposed to also defend the IRS? You got a conflict of interest here. Now, let's see. Stacy Young, Executive Director of Justice Connection, a DOJ alumni group, said in a statement, quote, "This case is a clear example of why Justice Department lawyers take an oath to serve the Constitution, not the White House. This department's leadership is intent on abusing its power to curry favor with the president and execute his retribution campaign," end quote. Now they're trying to say it's that this fund is to fight weaponization of government. But in reality, the government has been weaponized under Donald Trump. Now, why does Donald Trump constantly say that everybody else is weaponizing it? Because it's what he would do. I've said before, most accusations from Donald Trump is a confession. He thinks he is the smartest person in the room at any given moment. And he wants to go ahead and tell everybody that, well, this person's going to do this because that's what he thinks he would do if he was in their shoes. Jamie Raskin, a Democrat from Maryland, called the settlement pure fraud and highway robbery. No one can be both plaintiff and defendant in the same case, and no president can concoct a fake case for $10 billion in damages against the government so he can be plaintiff and defendant and then settle his bogus case against himself as a judge. This simply is not a genuine case or controversy as required by the Constitution, but Trump's DOJ is not arguing any of this because it's in on the scam, he said in a statement. Also said, quote, "This case is nothing but a racket designed to take $1.7 billion of taxpayer dollars out of the Treasury and pour it into a huge slush fund for Trump at DOJ to hand out to his private militia of insurrectionists, rioters, white supremacists, including those who brutally beat police officers on January 6, 2021, and sycophant accomplices to his election-stealing schemes," end quote. Now, Democrats in Congress have filed a lawsuit to block the settlement. And it is entirely possible that that would be enough to potentially offset everything, right? That lawsuit could look at this settlement and say, yeah, you can't spend that money. Congress didn't authorize it for that. And you can't, this whole settlement looks weird. And how they can try to claim that people who were duly convicted of crimes are now suddenly victims. Sure, there have been cases of people being convicted of crimes that were wrongfully convicted. Happens far too often. But you're telling me that every single member of the J6 batch of investigations and criminals and everything, you're trying to tell me what we saw with our own eyes, and when you look at the video of what happened there, is all of it was not what we saw and that those were all victims? Yeah, I don't think so. Trump says he will hold off on Iran attacks at request of Gulf states. President Trump will hold off on attacking Iran again at the request of leaders from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, he announced on Monday. Trump, in a Truth Social post, said the strikes were scheduled for Tuesday, but he was asked to hold off because serious negotiations are now taking place, and that, in their opinion, as great leaders and allies, a deal will be made which will be very acceptable to the United States of America, as well as all countries in the Middle East and beyond. He said the request came from Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. And I probably butchered some of those names, and if I did, I apologize. Trump said this deal will include, importantly, no nuclear weapons for Iran. He said, adding that he instructed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, along with Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane and others, to hold off the attack, but have further instructed them to be prepared to go forward with a full, large-scale assault on Iran at a moment's notice in the event that an acceptable deal is not reached. He doesn't know how to get out of this thing. He doesn't know how to get out of his war with Iran. So he constantly says, I'm going to bomb the hell out of them, and then backs off. I'm going to bomb the hell out of them if they don't do this, and then backs off. In part because he's past now that 60-day window where he needs congressional oversight, and he is not willing to test the waters as much when it comes to his party. Now, Donald Trump, when talking about Iran and everything else, and he was asked about the rising gas prices and stuff, he said, well, that's peanuts. That's peanuts, really. It'll come back down. It'll come back down. But right now, the rise in prices, it's just peanuts. Well, that's the thing. He's supposedly a billionaire. He doesn't look at things on the same level as you or I, right? He never has. He's always been relatively wealthy. He said he got a small loan to start his businesses in the 60s from his father. Well, you and I think of a small loan. A lot of people generally, at least the ones I know, would, if you said I got a small loan, they'd be thinking in numbers of under $1,000. That would be considered a small loan. But there are reports that it was up in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in the 60s, which for the time frame, that was almost unheard of. I mean, $10,000 would have gotten you a relatively nice, 10 to 20,000 would have gotten you a relatively nice house. Donald Trump is he's so out of touch with how things are going and the plight of the everyday person, it's not funny. Now, today we have primaries going on in Kentucky and Georgia. We're going to be watching those. I've talked about these primaries before. If a GOP candidate wins, that one that is Trump backed, that doesn't surprise me. The Trump endorsement is just seen as a way to tell about 30 to 35% of the Republican base which way to vote. That number automatically makes it easier for these candidates to win because a large chunk of that Republican base will vote whichever way Donald Trump says. Now, on Saturday, Senator Bill Cassidy got beat in a primary. He's a sitting U.S. senator, and he voted to end up advancing a war powers resolution. So they advance a war powers resolution. Now I had to pull the article up. I thought I already had it up. Senate. This comes from CBS. The Senate advanced a resolution to limit President Trump's war powers on Iran today, marking a breakthrough for Democrats after 7 previous failed attempts. Senators approved a motion to discharge the resolution from committee in a 50-47 vote. 4 Republicans, Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Rand Paul of Kentucky, and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, joined a bulk of Democrats in favor of advancing the resolution. Fetterman of Pennsylvania was the lone Democrat to oppose. This is the first time Cassidy supported advancing a war powers resolution. Now, he got beat in his primary race by a Trump-backed GOP nominee. Well, not even by one. The Trump-backed candidate only got like 41 to 43% of the vote, something like that. It wasn't enough to avoid a runoff. So, what if everybody who voted against the Trump-backed nominee votes against them again in that upcoming runoff? They're not going to win. So I'm not worried so much about these Trump-backed candidates winning. Now we are staring at some key races. In Kentucky, you've got Thomas Massie, who is up for re-election. He is facing a Trump-backed challenger. And Donald Trump has been running really hard against Massie. Now, I don't know how that is going to go when it comes time, because if Massie loses, Donald Trump is going to have yet another person in Congress willing to vote against him. Now, do I expect Massie to change parties if he loses his primary bid? No. Do I expect Bill Cassidy to change his party and be a Democrat? No. But I expect them now to start. They've got nothing to fear with Bill Cassidy, he already has nothing to fear. Massie, if he survives the challenge, he has nothing to fear because he proved that the voters care more about what he's doing than backing Donald Trump. And if he loses, well, he's not on the ballot in November. So either way, Massie has got more of a free rein to vote against Donald Trump. Now, talking about Cassidy, we had been talking about that slush fund. Senator Bill Cassidy, fresh off his loss in the Louisiana Senate Republican primary, is calling out Trump's administration creating an almost $1.8 billion fund to claim people who were targeted by the Biden Justice Department, saying it raises the specter of self-dealing. Quote, I don't actually see any legal precedent for that. We are a nation of laws. You can't just make things up whole piece, end quote. Cassidy was talking about this fund. Let's see. He says, quote, wait a second, they just came off the campaign trail. People are concerned about making their own ends meet, not about putting a slush fund together without a legal precedent. We are a nation of laws. If there needs to be a settlement, let's consider it, and Congress should come together and decide that, end quote. So again, Donald Trump comes out, punishes Bill Cassidy for not being loyal enough, and he'd been railing against Cassidy because Cassidy was one of the votes in the Senate to turn on Donald Trump when it came to his impeachment. And now Cassidy's got no reason to end up uh, protecting himself or to vote with Donald Trump to protect himself because he doesn't have to answer to voters anymore. And that's what we're going to see with more of these primaries. In certain cases, um, you're going to see that uh, all of these people that come out and turn on Donald Trump, they've got nothing to lose if they're not answering uh, to the voters. Now, in the Texas primary race, we finally have an endorsement. Donald Trump came out and endorsed Ken Paxton. And Ken Paxton uh, is the embattled attorney general for the state of Texas, is in a primary fight. I think the vote is next week for that runoff with current incumbent Senator John Cornyn. Now, if Cornyn wins, it's going to be hard fought. Cornyn, by the polls, has got a better chance against Democrat nominee Talrico. But by polling, Talrico is up in the polls against Paxton. So the best thing we could hope for is for Paxton to win. Now, if Texas flips blue, which it could happen, it would be in part because of Donald Trump's endorsement of a challenger to Cornyn. And if Paxton wins, it would be because of Donald Trump's endorsement of a horrible candidate to go up against Talrico. But that's neither here nor there. The whole thing here is that Donald Trump can't keep his hands out of these midterms, and he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing for loyal members of the Senate. Loyalty. That's all he cares about, right? He doesn't want an independent Congress. He wants Congress to do things the way he wants because he wants to rule by divine or executive fiat as a king. Now, MAGA doesn't understand this, and they don't understand the concept, a lot of them, about how our government is supposed to work. If Donald Trump had his way, everything he says, Congress would push through immediately and pass, no questions asked. Now they're not quite doing that. One of the things that Donald Trump has been pushing for has been to get rid of the filibuster. Hasn't happened. Why? Because Senate Republicans know there's going to come a point, and it may be as early as next year after the midterm elections, where they're going to be in the minority again. And they are going to want to block any attempt at passing things by a Democratic majority. But their real concern is what happens with a Democratic majority in both houses of Congress and a Democratic president, like I think is going to happen after the 2028 election. Well, after that happens, Donald Trump is going to be gone. Um, and Senate Republicans are afraid that if they get rid of the filibuster now, that Senate Democrats are going to turn around and push and just start putting through a bunch of stuff. They want to keep the filibuster because they want to have a way to try to block as much as they possibly can from ever going forward. Now, it could entirely be possible that the Democrats get rid of the filibuster um, and just start passing a whole ton of stuff with simple majority if they get back in control with a Democratic president. But that's a question for another day. We'll have to see what happens in 28. Now, best thing we could do is flip as many seats as we can here in the midterms and then give Democrats even more seats in the 2028 election, and get them as close as we can to a full 60 seat supermajority so we can go ahead and uh, just pass whatever we need without even changing the rules of the filibuster. Now, one of the last stories I'm going to touch on real quick here. We are in primary season, and Nancy Pelosi is not running for reelection in San Francisco. Now, she has endorsed, and I don't know anybody in this race, so I don't know whether this is good or bad. Retiring Rep. Nancy Pelosi on Monday endorsed San Francisco Supervisor Connie Chan in the race to succeed her. Pelosi said, quote, "I know and love this district. I know the Congress and I know Connie." End quote. Pelosi said, Chan sitting next to her in a video that the two campaigns shared to Instagram. Pelosi said, quote, "I am proud to endorse Democrat Connie Chan and ask you to join me in electing her to Congress. Thank you." End quote. Now, Pelosi was twice the Speaker of the House. She is retiring. She has been representing San Francisco in the House for almost 4 decades. The only woman to hold the gavel in U.S. history, the 86-year-old is the longest tenured member of California's House delegation by more than 3 years. With 87-year-old Rep. Maxine Waters, who is running for re-election, set to assume the mantle if she wins in November. Chan is a member of San Francisco's Board of Supervisors since 2021, entered the race in November by touting working-class roots and ties to Pelosi. In her launch video, Chan included a photo of herself with the longtime congresswoman and said, quote, "I stand on the shoulders of those who came before me and fought for the same values," end quote. Now, the problem here is going to be Pelosi represents the old guard Democrats and the establishment. And I don't know how well the endorsement is going to work. We will have to see how that primary plays out. The big news is that Nancy Pelosi not seeking re-election, of course. And we're going to get somebody younger to fill that role. More of the Democrats need to be doing that. I mentioned Maxine Waters, who is 87. Again, we have, and this goes to both sides of the aisle. Some of these older members of Congress need to finally step aside and let younger people make the decisions. I think the youngest age to be a member of the House of Representatives is 25. Why do we have people who are 60 years over that minimum threshold, still in there making decisions? Now, 25 is considered relatively young when it comes to politics. But still, we need to step away from the older people, and we need to get some younger, more progressive candidates. That's how we get real change. Now, the Democratic Party as a whole does back progressive ideas and helping everybody and those kind of things, and the social programs that the Republicans seem to despise. Don't get me wrong. But the only way we get closer to things like universal health care, actual minimum wage increase, and those kind of things is by electing younger people to Congress. And we will see if the old guard's endorsement, when California has their primary coming up, if this endorsement by Pelosi is going to be enough to push Connie Chan over the finish line, or if somebody else will get that endorsement. All right, that is going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow. And part of tomorrow, we'll be covering the primary campaigns, or the primary results, rather, from tonight. So thank you for taking the time to join me. Hope you have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.